Hey guys, this is Kyoku and welcome back to my channel. So today's case that we are going to be doing is a case of Kendrick Johnson, who was a 17-year-old boy that was found deceased rolled up in a gym mat. So before we hop right into the story, I just wanted to give a disclaimer saying that I mean no disrespect to the victim's family, or anybody involved in this case. This is just what I have found doing my research that I've compiled together for a story to tell you guys. So, as I said, Kendrick Johnson was only 17 years old when he was unfortunately found deceased rolled up in a gym mat in his school. So on the 11th of January 2013, he started off the day by going to school, just a normal school day. I believe it was the second day back after the Christmas break. So what he had planned to do for that day was he was going to go to school, go to his classes, and then I think he had some sort of sports game after school. So he was going to go to that game and then go home. So unfortunately, when he didn't get home, his mum, I think it was around 10 o'clock, started to worry, because he was the kind of child where it's like if something wasn't going to plan or if he was going to be late, that type of thing, he would always call and let his parents know. So he would never let them kind of worry about him unnecessarily. He wasn't kind of that kind of kid. So then when it got to 10 PM at night, his parents started to worry. So his mum decided that she was going to then go to the school to try and find him and see if he was still at the school, if he was still with friends and that type of thing. So she went to the school that night, tried to look for him, and unfortunately she could not find him anywhere. So she got home about 12:30 in the morning. She decided to call the police and report him missing. The police were a bit dismissive and kind of didn't really do anything to help at this point, but obviously she must have spent the night just worrying, wondering where he was. So the next day she decided to go to the school to make some flyers, missing persons flyers, to see if anybody had seen him, to ask around, just to generally carry on searching for him. However, while his mum was doing this in the old gymnasium at the school, so the school was set up in a way where you had kind of like an old gymnasium and a new gymnasium. So in the old gymnasium, I believe there was a class that was going on. I think it was called life sports or something like that. So all of the children were kind of gathering round ready for this class. Then one of the kids decided, I think it was a couple actually of the kids, would climb up on what they called the wrestling mats. So you know those big mats, I will post a picture, that are all rolled up. I think some students would leave shoes in them and that sort of thing, so they didn't have to pay for a locker, which is fair enough. So a couple of the students climbed up, and one of the female students actually looked into one of the gym mats. So the mat was kind of upright like this, and she looked into the mat down this way, and she could see sticking out 2 pairs of feet in socks, unfortunately. So she freaked out, as you would, got in touch. I think it was the coach that was there. So the coach came over, everybody was kind of gathered round, they were trying to pull him out, and unfortunately they couldn't. So what the coach did is he kind of tipped the mat over so it was on its side like this, and then obviously unrolled the mat, and unfortunately his body was found and he was deceased. So immediately at this point, the coach kind of got all of the children out of the class, because obviously you don't want kids to be around that kind of stuff. That's the last thing that you want to see. He cleared everybody out, and then I think it was either him or one of the students that then phoned the police at this point. From what I have read, I think it was one of the students rather than the coach. And I think the coach said as well that he couldn't remember who it was, but I do think it was one of the students in the end. So the police came pretty much straight away, and they put the school on lockdown, because obviously they don't really know what's gone on. Everybody is kind of panicking at this point, and then also his mum is actually at the school at the same time, so she does find out the same time that everybody else finds out. But a weird thing here is that they don't actually let the mum go to see him, which I think is a bit, I mean, I can kind of understand both points, because it's going to be destroying, obviously, going in and seeing your child like that. I can't imagine. But then at the same time, I don't know why they didn't. I don't know how it works, to be honest with you. So then they eventually, we'll get to that later, call the coroner, who does come, and they take his body off ready for an autopsy. So at this point, the way he was found, so he was kind of face down in an upright wrestling mat, you know, the big thick mats. He was face down in one of those mats, and his shoes were found kind of behind his knees. So you know, if kind of you'd have dived forwards and then somebody had dropped a pair of shoes after you were already in, is how his shoes were found, which is a bit suspicious. And there was also another pair of trainers and a hoodie found at the scene, and there was also some blood on the wall. However, looking at the reports, it does not look like any of this evidence was actually taken or tested. So another thing to note about this case is if you do actually do any of your own research, please be warned, the pictures out there unfortunately are quite graphic. They can be quite disturbing, because when he was found, his face looks beaten. It is really swollen, it's really bruised, he hardly looks recognisable. I'm not going to post the picture in this video because I think it is quite upsetting. So the first weird thing in this case really happens around this time. So generally speaking, a coroner would be contacted to let them know that there is a body that they need to come to. I think it's supposed to be within the hour. However, in this circumstance, they didn't actually get in touch with them for 6 hours. Like, no one has ever commented why. There's never been any explanation as to why this was the case, so if somebody could please explain, that would be great. Apparently this is against the state law, so also not a good start. The also other pair of trainers and a hoodie that was found on the scene, they were apparently never taken in as evidence, nothing was ever tested, and his parents confirmed that they did not belong to him, so we still don't know who those belong to. The same is as well with the blood that was found. So near where he was found, there was actually some blood found on the wall. Nobody has ever taken samples of this blood. It has never been tested, so you would have thought that would have been one of the first things you would have done, would have been to have tested blood at a crime scene. The crime scene was also not kind of closed off properly, and when the detectives came in to actually look through the scene to see what's happened, none of them actually wore any coverings on their feet. So what they should have done to preserve any potential evidence that was there, to stop any evidence from being destroyed, is they should have been wearing foot coverings, which is just common practice, but for some reason this was not done in this case, so another bit of negligence. So the first autopsy that was done came back very, very quickly, so it came back within 24 hours, and the official death cause was listed as suffocation. So what the police are suggesting happened, what their theory is that he was actually looking for his trainer. So what was common practice at this school, as I think I mentioned earlier, was a lot of the kids, instead of getting lockers, they would leave shoes and stuff in these gym mats. So what the detectives are suggesting happened is that he was reaching in, he went to grab his trainer, unfortunately he fell face first into the mat, and obviously because he was there for such a long time, he did suffocate and pass away, unfortunately. However, there's some issues with that. So the first one is that this happened in the middle of the day, so he still had one more class to attend to, which he did not show up for. There is also a lot of CCTV out there in regards to this case, which we will get to in a bit. But you can see on the CCTV that he walks into the gymnasium, and then 3 minutes afterwards, there's another bunch of students that walk into the same gymnasium. So if he had fell, surely he would have screamed, made some kerfuffle, something, so that they would have been alerted that he had fallen in this mat. But you can see on the CCTV that none of these students looked like that had happened, none of them looked like they were aware of this, so I'm not really sure what's happened there. The next hole with that theory is that his shoulders were 19 inches across. So obviously he had 19 inches across his shoulders. When these gym mats are rolled up, the diameter in the middle is 14 inches. So please explain to me how somebody that is 19 inches across here can fall into a hole that is 14 inches. I can't see it, and I believe even his dad did try to reenact this to see if it was possible. It was with a mat that was lying down though, so slightly different, but still proves the point that if you've got something that's wider than 14 inches, how are you going to fall into a mat? Another thing that we do get on here is with that theory, as the police are saying, if he was reaching for his shoes, surely his arms would have been found in kind of a reaching position, whereas his arms were actually found kind of straight down his body. So if his arms were found facing downwards, then how is he reaching for his trainers? Also, as I have said, his trainers were kind of placed behind his knees, so where is the trainer that he was reaching for? When the investigators did actually kind of get access to this CCTV footage, there were a lot more questions raised. So in regards to this CCTV footage, it was jumpy, and it did eventually come out that this was not original footage, and I think it was somebody got a specialist to have a look at it, and they did believe that it wasn't an original copy and some of it had been tampered with. So they believed that sections of the CCTV were missing, and even though there were so many cameras all around this school, there is an hour missing on all of these cameras, all of this CCTV footage that would have shown what would have happened and would have given kind of fundamental information here. So how that's missing, I cannot understand. I think that raises more questions than what it does solve any answers, in my opinion. All of these cameras were motion sensor cameras, so the fact that he went into the gymnasium and then 3 students went in a couple of minutes after, this would have triggered the cameras to be working, so they should have been filming at this point. So I think it is very suspicious that this footage is missing. Also brings to the point of, why was this footage tampered? I think as well it took a long time for them to get hold of this footage, so why do they not have kind of an original unedited piece of footage that they can watch from this CCTV? To me that just doesn't feel right, just sits really uneasy with me. So as you can imagine, his parents were not happy that the police had given up on this case. There was also kind of a lot of racism in the area at the time, so that could have been the case as obviously why the police weren't taking it as seriously as they should have done, because when you first have a look at this case it just screams that something more has happened. So the fact that they'd got an autopsy report back within 24 hours and already decided that this was a fatal accident, it just doesn't feel right to me. There was a lot of people that did say that if this was a young white lad that this would have been treated a lot differently. So obviously his parents still want answers. They have lost their son and they want answers, as anybody rightly would. So they actually hired somebody called William Anderson. He was a private pathologist, and they did exhume his body and they did a second autopsy. So this is where things get even weirder. So before they can do this second autopsy, they exhume his body, and then they go to do the autopsy and realise that there's actually some of his organs missing. I believe it included his heart and his lungs. His parents were never made aware of this, so obviously this, what the hell, why are they missing? So they got in touch with kind of the funeral director home place and was like, where are his organs? What has happened? Because when we opened him up, there was newspaper in place of where his organs should be. So by having a look at this, to me that just screamed, oh my god, what's going on here? But apparently this is quite common practice, but it is normally kind of cotton wool or something like that, where you've got a scenario where all the organs are not there and have had to have been stuffed to kind of put shape back into the body before you would bury him. However, his parents were never made aware of this, and the funeral home people said that we don't know, this is what we do, this is common practice for us, and we were just, this is how we were given him. So then they go back to whoever did the original autopsy, and I can't find any clear answers anywhere. The only thing that I've seen as to what they said was they were too far decayed to put back in the body, but Obviously this is now going to limit what they can do on a second autopsy, so again, it just adds more questions. So that aside, they decided to do what they could do and try and perform a second autopsy with what they've got. So when William was doing this autopsy, he did find a small bruise in the back of his neck where it looks like he had been hit with something. And even though it was a small bruise, he did say that this would have been fatal to Kendrick. So when this autopsy was finished, the cause of death was actually listed as caused by blunt force trauma, which, if you have seen the pictures to this case, which are heartbreaking, you can believe that's what it is. He does look like he's been beat. Whether that is just from being upside down, I don't know. It just seems a bit more to me. I mean, have a look if you want to, but the picture is quite graphic that is out there. So obviously once these results come out, his parents are mad. They are mad. So they then do file a wrongful death lawsuit against the high school, saying that this was a cover-up and that their son Kendrick was actually murdered. In this lawsuit, there was actually 2 students mentioned. So the 2 students that were mentioned in this lawsuit are Brandon and Brian Bell. So Kendrick's mum had been told by him that he was actually being harassed and bullied by these 2 students. And there was actually a lot of rumours going around that Brandon and Kendrick were actually in some sort of conflict over a similar love interest. There isn't that in concrete anywhere, but that is what the rumours were that were going around at the time. Because Brandon and Brian Bell's father was in fact an FBI agent. These 2 lads were looked into, but no charges came about. But when your dad's an FBI agent, to follow on from that, there was actually an article in a magazine called Ebony Magazine, I believe, which did kind of like mention, like a side, didn't directly name these 2, but hinted towards these 2 that were the cause of death. And then I think that ended in another lawsuit being filed against the magazine by Kendrick's family. There's a lot of lawsuits that do go backwards and forwards in this case, and obviously the more that people were being accused, then they brought up lawsuits against Kendrick's parents for defamation of character, so it did kind of get a bit messy with lawsuits at this point. Another point to add in regards to that was that Kendrick's parents, obviously they were protesting hard, people were protesting to get this reopened, to people to have a look at this case, because this is a closed case and the police are just not looking at it anymore. They have now said that this is unfortunately a fatal accident and that there's no more to it. So Kendrick's parents were kind of making flyers, they were handing out posters to try and get more attention and get their son the justice that they felt that he deserved. There was some kind of comeback in regards to these flyers, because on these flyers it had basically got a picture of him on there, deceased, and I think it had got a caption like saying something along the lines of, does this look like an accident, something like that to you. And it is a graphic picture, but what it is saying on these flyers is that this is what he looks like just after he had passed away. However, it does turn out that this is what he looked like after the first autopsy. To me, I didn't think there was that much of a difference, but apparently you can look quite different after your first autopsy, as opposed to rather it just being once you have passed away. But I think people need to be kind of more lenient when they put blame towards the parents, because they've just lost their son. They've lost their son and something awful has happened, whether it was an accident, whether it was a murder, either way they've lost a son. They are grieving, I can't imagine the pain they must be going to, and I don't think you can say how you would react until it happens to you. So I think people need to kind of back off on how they're judging his parents here, because unless you've been in that situation, you do not know how you're going to act. Eventually, in 2018, with this all still going on, there was actually a third autopsy done, and the cause of death again was listed as blunt force trauma. So you have got one that was done very, very quickly, but did have all of the organs there that was saying it was suffocation. Then you've got 2 autopsies after that that are saying that it is blunt force trauma, which were done by, I think they were both done by the same individual, William, who did kind of stand by this, and he said this is blunt force trauma, not suffocation. I mean, looking at his face, it does look like something bad did happen. He does look beat up, really bruised and badly swollen. So if you do want to have a look at that picture, I'm not going to post it, as I've said. Google it and it is pretty much the first thing that comes up, but I have warned you, it's not nice. So another thing that I would just like to add to this case as well is that actually in 2013, when this did happen, a female student did go to, I think it was the sheriff, the detective, and kind of report some suspicious behaviour. So I think it was on either the day of or the day after Kendrick was found, or whatever happened unfortunately to him. She said that there was a male student that posted this saying on Facebook: "When you start messing with goons, bodies start showing up." Another post that he did put up was, "Start killing them off one by one." Now, I don't know who this individual was. There's no name in the police report that does talk about this. However, it doesn't really look like it's been looked into that much. To me, I can't see how that is such a big coincidence, personally. The fact that this happens, this suspicious circumstance happens, and somebody is posting this on Facebook. So in the report, it does give a little bit more detail. It says that this girl has told police that basically that Kendrick was part of a group, a clique, that was in the opposite one as to what Brandon was, and they were feuding over a love interest, which is similar to what I said earlier again, but I feel like this hasn't been looked into. Obviously I don't know that for a fact, but to me that seems like a massive screaming kind of what the hell is going on here. Clearly there's something more to this. So that is really it in regards to kind of the facts of this case, exactly what's happened and where we are with this case at the moment. So at the moment this is a closed case. I think there are still some petitions out there to get this case reopened, but as far as the police are concerned, it was a fatal accident and they're no longer looking into it. So what do you guys think, really? I mean, when I was looking at this case, the more and more I looked into it, I personally can't see how it's an accident. If you've got a gym mat that is stood up like that, yeah, if you fell over and fell into it, maybe your head would go into it up to here and you would yell and other students would hear you, but I can't see how you can fit in a hole that is smaller than your shoulders unless you were rolled up into it. Especially with your arms being down as well. If he was reaching for a trainer, why was his arms not up? Why were they down by his side? And why were his trainers behind his knees? Another point to consider is, why was the evidence not collected at the scene? The other pairs of trainers in the hoodie, who do they belong to? We still don't know. The blood on the wall, we still don't know. I think somebody said that a girl may have injured themselves earlier in the year, but why has this not been tested? It baffles me. To me, I can't see how this is just an accident and nothing more to it personally. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you've got any requests, please let me know, comment down below, and like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. Thanks guys.